Well, lads, welcome to the Culture Couch Live. It's number 8 for the year, so it's skipping through. So how are you, boys? G'day, Woz.
Who's he?
Emil.
Excellent, boy. Anything to report this week for the listeners? Any sort of highlights? How was everyone's week?
Yeah, we had a really interesting week, didn't we, Emil? We've been working with Leeds Rhinos Rugby League Club in Leeds, obviously. And so we've been getting up at 5 a.m. and working late at night they're on camp. And so because of COVID, we can't travel. And so Emil and I have been sort of facilitating stories and feedback and profiling. It's been an amazing week, hasn't it, Em?
It was. It was 3:30 rises for the 4 o'clock starts. I think, Jez, you were 5 o'clock in the morning a couple of times. But it was amazing. After we did the session, we did our little review. We were just reflecting on. They were all in one room in Leeds, the UK. Dave Misson was in Melbourne at his home. Jez, you were in a hotel in Newcastle, and I was in my little den here in Toronto, Canada. And we were doing the Your Story exercise, and it was just, for taking my breath away thinking about it, the depth of their vulnerability was extraordinary. And to think that we were all having the same visceral experiences through the computer in 16,000 miles apart was just something of like, you don't do that often every day, but their storytelling was extraordinary, and the hardships and adversity that some of these young men have faced is just, it's quite profound. So it was very powerful camp.
Well, fantastic. Great share, boys. And actually on culture, maybe a shout out to Cam Smith, who finally hung up the boots. You talk about culture, and you talk about, Craig Bellamy. They kicked off last night and won again. And, so a bit of a shout out to Cam Smith, who's been an amazing role model, and, what a great leader for your football club. So
he's got a statue, Ruzi. Have you got one of those?
Yeah, I actually have, Murph. We can talk about that another time. Really. Actually, it's not about Culture Couch Live. People have got statues, so why don't we do that next week?
We'll just get Michael Jordan to jump in to the Zoom.
Actually, we digressed a little bit. I was wondering who's got the most things named after them. It'd be Bradman in Australia, wouldn't it?
Bradman by a mile. I reckon.
Yeah, by a mile. That's what I was thinking.
I was going to say the reason being cricket goes across the country,
whereas
AFL and rugby sort of a bit more regional.
And I think there probably was another reason, Murph, too. He was pretty good.
Look up there.
Let's not forget that. You've given him donuts.
I've only got one signed piece of memorabilia. And there it is, up in the corner there.
Apologies to the Bradman family too. From Jared. He was a reasonable cricketer. All right, let's launch into it. Our first question is from Natalie. I've heard you boys talk about real talk and face-to-face feedback. At our company, we do anonymous feedback and surveys. What are the benefits of both, and what are the negatives? Okay, good question. I'll probably touch on Murph the first. We actually use their surveys, don't we, as part of our sort of framework, and we've got our own survey. So maybe kick off with the benefits of just a general survey, and then a little bit of a comment around the anonymous feedback.
Yeah, so often we're engaged with companies initially because they've got low engagement scores, or they're not sure what to do with the feedback they've been given from their engagement surveys, and we do our own as well. So that's the surveys or engagement surveys are really good, I guess, insight into some of the issues that may or may not exist with your staff and where the problems might lie. And from that point, companies engage either us or other companies to sort of facilitate feedback. And some companies specialize in anonymous feedback, but Natalie, I don't think that I would go down that path. Our view is that we need to have the conversations face to face. And if I've got feedback for you, well, then probably should give it to you, as opposed to doing it anonymously and then you wonder about where it come from. So we just 100% believe in working with people to help them have face-to-face conversations with the people that count.
Yeah, it's interesting. Having been involved in footy since I was like 17, I mean, it was really the bane of a lot of the culture problems at footy clubs. When you'd hear from the boot starter or the coach wouldn't tell you, you'd have to look at, you have to watch league teams on a Thursday night to find out whether you're in or out, or you're getting a physio treatment. Now, to be fair to those coaches, a lot of it was around time, but it does create an enormous problem, isn't it? Because as a CEO of a couple of different companies, I suspect the anonymous feedback becomes a problem, because you spend the whole week trying to work out who filled out the form and what were they saying, and often you'll get it wrong. What's your experience with this?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think as Jerry pointed out, a lot of companies do it, but I think just to reflect on myself personally, my strength and also my weakness at times is you'll always know where you stand. So I constantly give feedback face to face. Now, in the past, I'd just give it direct to people and not necessarily A, give context, B, do it from an energy of care as much as it's direct. And so a lot of times people would feel very threatened and undermined because of the way the approach that I took. And I think that's why a lot of companies don't do it. And HR departments are generally quite scared of doing it because you just haven't set the context to do so. Humour comes into it. People don't, especially the sort of integrated energies, are not comfortable sitting in a room when someone's getting feedback that might be quite direct and controversial. But again, if the foundations are set that we're doing it because we care, we're not coming from humour, we're delivering it from a sort of in a direct nature, but we're doing it because we want to improve, then the sort of foundations of feedback is actually quite powerful. Because also a lot of times, if you're an individual, you might feel a certain way about somebody, but you might want to give them that feedback because you're worried about the return serve that you're going to get from doing so. But if you're sitting in an open forum, you might get someone who's more inclined to give the feedback might say the same thing that you wanted to say, and now all of a sudden you go, okay, you feel more comfortable even back that up. Yeah, Emil, I kind of agree with Jared there in what he said, because you do that. And so you've now got this sort of consensus and this energy that could help you actually work through challenging conversations that you didn't want to have before. But it comes down to the HR departments, or people are generally quite scared of the feedback being turned into a negative. You're going to have a massive HR issue, maybe a fair work scenario on your hands. And that's because you just haven't set the right foundations. And that's what our organisation does.
It's a great point. We had a fantastic feedback session yesterday. And I was sort of thinking last night, how do you set up anonymous 360 feedback? We actually don't have the framework. Because what we did yesterday was kept on going back to the framework. Okay, what's the behaviours? And it was great, because by the end of it, I think we'd done 4 or 5 people. The lady, one of the ladies said, "Oh, this is just so much easier now." Because we set the framework, we'd set up the behaviours, we'd set up a really safe environment. So, Emil, that really it, isn't it? I mean, I couldn't imagine even with us, as well as we know each other, I couldn't imagine you guys setting it. But if we hadn't set our behaviours and we hadn't built relationships and we hadn't done all those things before, so there is a process that goes into open and honest feedback, isn't there?
Yeah, the process is what creates the safety to have it, right? And that reference point we talk about, right? Using your values and behaviours as the reference point for the conversation about performance. So then to Waz's point, it's predicated on the care and improvement, because we've defined performance as these values that align us, like sort of from head and heart, and then these are the behaviours that define our culture. So if we want to be the best culture and the best performers we can be, we need to challenge these behaviours and reward these ones. And again, the process is to share with your mate why you love working with them and the things you want them to keep doing first and foremost. Juice them up with some great positive vibes, and then your areas of growth are these. And then towards the point again, the consensus says, well, there's a majority of the team thinking this, so it's probably true. Because one of the things you get, if you get a little spark of feedback here that you don't like, and then a little spark over here 3 weeks later, it's never condensed and creates that ignition, if you will, to create the behaviour change. And we know we change, we like to change because we're accountable to our teammates.
Yeah,
That's very important.
But picking up on that, and this is the problem with anonymous feedback. Because go to Waz's point about setting up the right environment. If you are doing it anonymously and then feeding it in through your direct supervisor, you haven't had to set up the environment.
No.
No, so all you've done is just grab this feedback, put it in a pile, and said, "Hey, Ruzi, here it is."
Yeah.
These people, and so you actually haven't changed the environment and the reason that the feedback wasn't given. So it goes back to creating the psychological safety that Emil's talking about, and then having the honest conversations. But if we do anonymous feedback, like I haven't had to change one single thing in the organisation. All I've done is just here's a survey, here's a feedback. hey, Ruzi, X, Y, and Z think this, and it actually creates gossip, as was said. So it just. I know a lot of people make a lot of money out of it, but it drives me insane because I just don't think it works.
Yeah.
Well, as you're talking through it, Merv, it's like running a marathon without training, isn't it? I mean, it's going to break down. Something's going to break down because you just haven't prepared for the marathon.
Sorry, Ruzi, you didn't like that analogy, was?
No, I just said it. I agree. I think that ultimately there's no accountability, right? Like, let's say I'm in a room in a group of people and we all say something about Emil. Emil, you got to keep turning up on time or telling us when you're not going to turn up on time. Now, all of a sudden, Emil comes into the next 3 to 4 meetings not on time. Well, because 10 people in the room heard that he wasn't turning up on time, then there's accountability the next time on that. Because you basically, guys, well, shit, Emil, you've got this feedback that you need to start doing this or stop doing this or keep doing it, whatever it is. You've got everyone else's in the forum being able to actually ensure that happens next time or flag it that it doesn't. If it's done anonymously, you don't even know what that person's feedback is. And there's a weakness there too.
I think it's also the support. I mean, if you and I have obviously worked a lot in footy, and in what gets missed by the media always report on the feedback. Gary Ablett got certain feedback, Nick Davis got certain feedback. But what they don't see, and this is very hard when it's anonymous, is the team wrapping their arms around them and saying, look, Em, can I pick you up, mate? If I know you're struggling, I've got a new baby. Okay. So we don't get a chance to support our teammates because Emil doesn't get a chance to look me in the eye. And then the follow-up, which is missed with the anonymous, is, mate, I'm here to help you. All right? You're not putting your work in time. You're telling me now your workload's too big. I appreciate the share. How do we fix the problem? And that's really the most important thing, isn't it? How do we become a high-performing team?
Yeah, on that, yes, we had that scenario yesterday. Sorry to interrupt, guys. We gave the person the feedback and they said, look, I'm sorry I've been letting the team down, but these are the several things that have been happening at home. And so you get that context that the reason why their behaviour has been certain ways because, there's significant things that are happening at home. And now you can, as a group, you're now there to support them, but also that vulnerability just creates a stronger relationship across the team as well.
100%, Murph. I mean, how many times, Murph, have we continued to talk about an issue within the session? So we're actually, it's not just about the feedback. You and I have done it, enormously over the last sort of 6 months through this COVID period. We've picked up on a conversation and we've seen that conversation all the way through to a solution.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And I guess we've seen it this week with Leeds, is that the guys sharing their stories and getting to know each other builds this enormous relationship. So therefore, when you do have those conversations, it's actually the reason you're saying, let's put your arm around someone and follow the story through and provide support in context, as was said. So it's beyond me. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, it doesn't make
anyone
any
would do it,
sense.
but I guess if people don't like having difficult conversations, then at least they can tick the box. So I don't want to say that it's a tick the box exercise, because I know some benefit does come out of it, but in some ways it is a tick the box exercise, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the piece about that, I think a really important part of our process as well is it's not, okay, here's your feedback. I think we've talked about it, but here's your feedback, Jez, and then everyone's done and Jez just stands up and walks off. There's the moment, the getting in sync part is the biggest part, I reckon. The part where the receiver can either read what they've thought about themselves in reflection, or they get to ask questions and, to Waz's point, get in sync. So now we know that team member of Waz's needs some help. So then if someone's got a bit of spare time and going, yeah, look, I've actually got a bit of bandwidth, it's like a defender getting off their player to run over and do a double punch on a person who's on a taller player forward, right? And that's that teamwork part that I think the corporate sector just consistently misses, that you're a team. So let's function as a team. And the real talk part helps us understand what our expectations are of each other. And we closing those gaps over a sustained period of time. We know how to treat certain people at certain times, and we call it out and we help each other.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, Natalie, isn't it? And what we would say with the feedback and the open and honest feedback face to face, it's part of a framework. You know, the problem with the anonymous feedback, there's no framework around it. You know, so what we would say is try and create an environment where you can have open, honest feedback, and that's the starting point. If you're still having to have anonymous feedback, then you need to look at why. Is that a fair summary, boys?
That's pretty good.
100%, Ruzi. If you can't create the environment to have the honest conversation, then the anonymous feedback process is probably not. People will get the feedback, but it's probably not going to change much.
Yeah,
I think there's lots of examples at the minute where people haven't been listened to, or haven't. When they've been brave enough to speak up, they haven't been listened to, and people hide stuff for whatever reason. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. Get the environment right.
Yeah, so get the environment right, create a really safe environment. And I think what's mentioned it is we're here to get better. You know, we want to improve, and that's why we set the framework. That's why we look each other in the eye, and that's why then we wrap our arms around each other. So really, really great conversation. Hopefully, Natalie, that gives you a bit of a view of where we think. Boys, well done on the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Have a fantastic weekend, Jez and Emil.
Yep. Thanks, boys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend. What's that?
See you next week.
No fun lunch, boys.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Footy photo seat there. That's great.
Got this.
See you, boys. Ciao.
See you, boys.
Well done. See you, boys.